Thanks again, everyone, for being here. My name is David Wadsworth, and account executive here at Revelwood, and joined by my colleague, Haley Elliott. We'll be showing you today's overview demo of adaptive planning here in a few moments. But just wanted to take a few minutes to give you an idea of what to expect today. So just some background on Revelwood, that we're a platinum business partner of Workday. And what that means is that we're part of an extremely select group of partners to help you evaluate and implement adaptive planning. With over 25 years of experience, we're made up of a diverse team of certified and experienced consultants that bring decades of financial operations and system know-how. And we've implemented over 150 adaptive customers over the past couple of years, and this continues to grow. Not only that, but we've also helped existing adaptive customers with model enhancements, integration, support services, and one-on-one training. And I'm aware that some of you may be here because you have an active initiative to get into a cloud FP&A solution, and some of you may just be here to learn or you're curious. Either way, we greatly appreciate you taking 15 minutes with us in the next few days just to have a quick chat and see what your current challenges are. And if you have any feedback and whether there are any resources that we can follow up with that might be helpful. And an important thing to know is that the demo today is meant to really just give you a glimpse into what adaptive planning can do for the Office of Finance. We should be finished in about 45 minutes. And during that time, everyone will be on mute. But if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. So please enter there and we'll try to get to it. And if not, we'll make sure to get back to you via email. So I just wanted to start off with a few clients within the manufacturing space that we've worked with here directly at Revelwood. And I know that the manufacturing space can be complex. So we just wanted to break that down by sub-industry, which you'll be able to see here. So adaptive planning is a place where you can do your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. Everything that you need is in one solution, and it'll act as your central source of truth, if you will. So typically, we might be talking with finance teams and pulling data in from the general ledger, but adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need it to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place to model and report on with confidence. Just to give you an idea of some of the areas of the business that you can model and plan using adaptive, as it's not limited to core FP&A, you can model out really any operational area of the business that you want within adaptive. Haley will ensure to dive somewhat deeper into the demonstration today, but feel free to ask in the Q&A any questions or topics that you're interested in exploring, and we'll be sure to follow up and schedule a tailored demonstration of our capabilities at a later date. Now, just to give you an idea, Adaptive runs on Elastic Hypercube technology, which is a patented Workday technology and a key competitive differentiator. There's a couple of types of solutions in the market, the Excel add-in solutions that have all the same problems of Excel, too many members in the dimensions, counts, views, job titles. It's going to lock up Excel, and Excel can't calculate just what it needs. It has to calculate every sheet, save it all to disk. So if your Excel is locking up now, your Excel add-ins will lock up for the same reason. And then you have your traditional cube databases. The image on the left here is a graphical representation of the database. Traditional cube databases have to save every intersection of every dimension. So you see all that white space, it's all a bunch of zeros, and you must save it all to the disk. So what our proprietary database does is save only the valid data intersections. It's also intelligent, so when you change something, it doesn't have to save all, rather it calculates only what it needs to, and that's why it's so fast. So where one of these cube-based systems will tell you to keep the number of dimensions down or get too slow, or they'll break the database up into multiple cubes that must be batch updated, and it loses detail each time you move. But because of this technology, we'll have a client with 200 dimensions, hundreds of versions, and it just has minimal impact on performance. But the reason it's key is because it makes the solution scalable and able to have an unlimited number of dimensions and versions and scenarios. And when the system needs more processing power, our system's intelligent and expands to give it to you. But what's equally important is that you have this power without losing the ease of use and maintainability. And as you'll see in the demo today, everything's extremely intuitive with drag and drop functionality so that the end users can own the system without assistance from IT. And that's why Adaptive has almost 6,000 customers globally in all industries. And it's way more than any of our competitors in the FP&A space alone. Did you know that Adaptive has a 95% gross retention rate? It just speaks to the value of what these customers are getting out of the Adaptive across all different types of industries, as you can see here. And our commitment to innovation and customer success is recognized across by the industry. It's a product that gets the highest user ratings and delivers business agility in times of change. And you can expect the software to be easy to use, implement, and maintain as your business scales. Being ranked #1 ease of use, customer experience, satisfaction, usability, and ROI, this should make you really excited to see Haley's demo now. No pressure.
Cool. Thank you very much, David. And hello, everyone. As David mentioned, my name is Haley Elliott. I'm one of Revelwood's pre-sales solutions consultants for Adaptive. I've been working with Adaptive for about 3 years now and actually come from implementation as a project lead. And I actually specialized in sales and operations planning for manufacturing before moving more into the FP&A implementations. So we'll kind of be getting the best of both worlds today. What you're seeing on the screen right now is our agenda. So as you can tell, we are not going to cover every single type of manufacturing we possibly could because we would be here for days. But we're going to try to get through the basics of consensus supply and demand planning with a touch on some of the basic FP&A functions. So your financial statements, your reporting, that kind of thing. One thing I will say is that this today will be a little bit more advanced on the modeling side. So if you do want to do a deeper dive into some of the workforce planning sheets or just some basic finance concepts, we'd also encourage you to either schedule one of those follow-ups or check out our YouTube channel for some of those more basic kind of FP&A videos. But from there, just to give you a run through of what today is going to look like, we are going to start with the basics. So foundational data model, what are you going to see on every screen and how do we navigate in the system? From there, we're diving directly into the meat of today, which is going to be supply chain planning with active dashboards, bringing in your orders on hand, purchase orders, and kind of how procurement and finance can start to work together. And then adding detail to your procurement process or your financial planning process just by knowing who you're actually sourcing your individual additives from. So we'll show that model. And then we'll move more into the demand and sales forecasting. So starting with supply, just because we always need to know what we can actually get. We can't just operate on an unconstrained sales forecast. So we'll start with those constraints. And then we'll cap everything off with reporting and visualization. Couple of other follow-up topics that we're not going to see today that you might be interested in, specifically if any of y'all are in the pharma industry, are going to be things around gross to net modeling, rebates, payer mixes, reimbursement schedules. But I'm going to keep things a little bit higher level than that today. So I'm going to go ahead and pop into Adaptive. Like David said as well, if you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A and I'll try to get to as many as I can at the end. Otherwise, we'll follow up. But for now, let's go ahead and jump in. So you should be seeing Adaptive. And we're going to start with what we call the foundational data model, which again is the basic elements that make up the entire planning model in Adaptive. So there are 3 main parts to that. The first one is going to be your level structure. So your level structure is typically your organizational structure, usually departments, locations. If you have multiple subsidiaries, that's where it would go. And the idea here is that you'll assign your department heads or your floor managers, something like that, to their individual department or level. And then every single dashboard, report, and sheet, and when I say sheets, I mean kind of the working screens that they'll key in their budgets, will all be automatically filtered to that level. So the idea is that's one, going to make sure there's no confusion about where they should actually be entering in data. They're not going to have access to other departments' data. But two, it means that you're not having to maintain several different templates for every single kind of model that you're trying to build out. So if you have 20 departments, you're not going to have 20 tabs. You're going to have one template and use the level structure to filter that tab. The last piece on the level structure is that this is where multi-currency will be handled. So if you have multiple subsidiaries in multiple countries and need a budget in local currency, Adaptive will auto exchange up the hierarchy so that you don't have to worry about FX conversions or doing any of that manually. Okay. The other item that you're going to see up here on the right is the version interface. So you do get an unlimited number of versions with Workday Adaptive Planning. Your subscription will not change no matter how much data you load in here. I personally work with a client who has 11 terabytes of data. I know some of you are probably shocked right now, but yes, you will have the same capability to scale to that level of planning if you so choose to. You'll also notice some of these have little lock icons. That just means that if you have a board approved budget or something along those lines, you can lock that version down so that end users aren't able to make changes to the data in that version anymore, but they can still pull it into reports for maybe a budget versus actuals or replicate it into another version of our reforecast. So this really is meant to be a continuous planning tool, not just somewhere where you do your budget and leave it for a year. We want to get more active in the process and actually start moving into that working forecast, especially with how many changes everyone's experiencing right now. The last piece I want to cover before we actually hop into modeling and content and dashboards is just navigation. So again, drawing back to how do we move through the system? Your entire planning, reporting, and analytics process is in one pane in Adaptive. So you should not have to sign in to any other system to complete any part of that process. And I'll prove that out as we go along today. But just to run us through some of these options, although we will be coming back to most of them. Sheets, as I mentioned, are going to be your working screens, your data input templates, kind of where calculations are happening and that kind of thing. So we'll look at a few of those. Assumptions are going to be where drivers are stored. So if you have bill of materials, kind of standard cost assumptions, something like that, you'll key those into one area. And anytime you update an assumption, that value will update in every sheet it is referenced. We'll come back to reports and dashboards. If any of you have intercompany eliminations or consolidation needs, Adaptive does have a native module for that. So we can absolutely have that discussion. And then we can also create kind of checklists to guide people through the system, approval processes, all of that, which I also won't really be diving in today, but just so you're aware it's there. The part I do want to pause on real quick is just integration. So as David mentioned, we are data agnostic, which means we can truly connect to any source system, even if you're concerned because you have an older on-prem ERP, something like that, we can connect to it. The idea is we'll connect direct to your source systems using our own integration interface. So we do not use a third-party ETL tool to complete any of the integrations. And we'll just have any of your data automatically load, usually on a nightly basis, but you could do it as quickly as every 15 minutes if you want to, or come in and manually run a task every couple of minutes. Doesn't kick anyone out of the system, and your source system is not going to experience any sort of performance impacts. So that's the automated option. And then you do have the option to still just import Excel files if there's something like maybe an employee roster that you don't want to automatically load every night, something along those lines. The last thing I'll mention before we go into models is just going to be support. So Adaptive is meant to be owned by the finance team, or if you're more on the operation sales side of the house, by your team as well. It's meant to be quite IT light. So the idea is you have a ton of access to product documentation. Workday does provide 24/7, 365 support to all of its clients. It's not additional on top of your subscription. It is just included. And then there's also a nice little question mark at the top of every page. That's just a context dependent knowledge base. kind of like your own little IT person in your back pocket, except you don't have to submit a ticket to get an answer. You just see, hey, I'm on dashboards right now, and it's going to tell me all of the things that I could possibly need to know about how to build a dashboard. Cool. So let's chat about what's happening on the screen. One thing I will mention is that not everyone has to have the same view when they sign into the system. I just want to see an overview of kind of my orders on hand, supply overview, when are we going to be short, that kind of thing. Someone else might want to have a worksheet up here, a standard report that they like to look at, or just company announcements. So this can be customized on an end user by end user basis. And that's going to be true for every screen we look at. So just keep in mind, you can really streamline this to make your data easy to digest. But let's chat dashboards and models. So like I said, we're going to start more from the supply chain view and then move into sales forecasting. Where we're going to start is purchase order management. So just one example of how we might use active dashboards to manage our current supply, do vendor analysis. And this is a really great example of a bridge between our finance teams, our procurement teams, and our project management teams, and kind of gives you an idea of how Adaptive can start to integrate those different planning processes. But dashboards in Adaptive are called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. One of those is going to be that you can actually click into any dial we're seeing on the screen and either explore data, where you're going to see a nice cell explorer that gives you a bunch more detail. Will take you back to the input sheet. So getting from your visuals back to a sheet if someone's more data driven and not really a visual person. And then you have access to an audit trail to see who's been making changes to the data. You also have an automatically generated drill down path. This was not coded in. You add a dimension to the model. Adaptive is going to automatically sync it up with your reports because everything's on one database. So if I see my costs, maybe I want to break that down by vendor to see where I'm spending that money. Maybe I want to know what I'm sourcing from those vendors. You get the idea. You can drill down to whatever level of detail you want. One question I commonly get in this industry is, can I go all the way down to the SKU level? And the answer is yes. Or if you want to plan at a higher level for some things like product family, you can also do a mix. The other cool thing here that's going to really differentiate Adaptive from some of your more just standard standalone BI tools is the ability to bring models directly onto your sheets. So if I go ahead and enlarge my inbound POs or POs that have already been issued, we're going to see what's called a modeled sheet. So modeled sheets in Adaptive are used for everything from loading in contract details, CRM details, tracking your prepaids. We use this type of sheet for workforce planning. And the reason it's so flexible is because you are choosing what columns to bring onto this sheet. So this is just an example. Everything can be tailored to how you want to load in your data. And something I didn't mention on data is you're not just restricted to financial data. You can load in your purchase orders. You can load in inventory or operational metrics, downtime, anything like that. But in terms of what's happening here, you'll see I have a couple of recognition methods. I've included my terms. And if I right click into any of these line items and go into row details, I'm going to get a pretty accurate picture of when those payments are actually going to happen. So cool, that was the actual cost, net 60 terms. So I'm not going to start paying that or seeing cash go out until August. And even then it's upfront 50%, and then we're recognizing or amortizing the rest over the next 12 months. So just giving you an idea of the fact that we can get to a more accurate cash forecast and when your cash is actually coming in or going out using this type of planning logic. What's also cool here, though, is that you can come into a sheet on your dashboard and say, hey, maybe I want to renegotiate one of my larger contracts. I want some different payment terms. I'll save that off. And you're going to see a little dot, dot, dot pop up over all of my dials. And that's actually going to show me the end effect of the change I just made. So just to drive that point home, since my models are on the same database as my visuals, instead of kind of pushing my model data into a different BI tool, something like that, when I make a change to my models for a different scenario, I'll actually see my metrics update right away here. Cool. So just one other thing to notice is the other use cases for this. So for those of you who are in finance who want to have more of a hand in actually approving the purchase orders that are going out or something along those lines, you can absolutely have your own little space here. Purchase orders do not have to just inform procurement. You can also check, hey, this was the budgeted expense. These are the POs they're actually requesting. We need to reject some of these or reconsider them. So I'll go ahead and switch a couple of these either back to pending or rejected and see if we're tracking back on budget. So nice way for finance to get involved in the process as well. And then for any of you who have more of an installation side of your business or something like that, you can also start to incorporate the project management team so they can see, have we actually ordered enough to meet the backlog or the demand rather for our upcoming projects. So just giving you a flavor of all of the different things you can do in dashboards, all the different teams you can bring in, and then the different types of models you might start to build out as well. And then you can also bring in assumption sheets like we see up here around transit times, or kind of full freight, less than truckload, something like that, and see how even transit assumptions affect your overall supply. One other item that I'll mention on the supply side of the house is just going to be an additional kind of layer of detail that we can bring in, which is the actual recipe mix. So a lot of you who are in tangible goods probably want to be able to eventually get down to this sort of level where I'm looking at the different components of each of my products, whether they're internally or externally sourced, and then composition percentages. We actually built this out for one of our large enterprise clients, and the reason we wanted to be able to do this was to more accurately track expenses and to actually be able to get to an analysis where we say, hey, would it be cheaper for us to internally produce this instead of continuing to externally source? So just giving you an idea of another layer of detail you might add in. But cool. From there, we are going to go ahead and move more into the sales forecast side of the house. So what I'm looking at right now is a cube sheet. So we saw a modeled sheet, which is column-based. Cube sheets are going to be more like pivot tables that you're used to in something like Excel, except a little bit more user-friendly. So just to walk you through what's happening on the screen here, we have green numbers and black numbers. Green numbers are my actuals coming in. Black numbers are my plan or budget data. Couple of things you can do here. One, if you just have a target number of units you're trying to ship or a target revenue dollar amount, something like that, you can always key that in for the year, and Adaptive will give you a bunch of options to break that back. For most of you, you're going to want to use prior year actuals so that you can more accurately guess when your units are going to ship. So Adaptive's looking at my past year's shipping history, and is actually saying, cool, those 6,000 units, this is how it's probably going to break back if your sales follow the same trend as the previous year. You are also going to notice a bunch of calculated fields. So those blue little triangles are just saying this is a calculated field. You can see one of the calculations up here. Formulas in Adaptive are not based on a proprietary coding language. Pretty similar to Excel syntax with the exception that it's account-based. So just to clarify that, when you're in Excel, it's more cell-based. So you see A2 times B400. In Adaptive, I see I'm taking my units, so this units account from my product sales sheet, and multiplying it by a price assumption. So the formula will actually, in plain English, tell you what it's using as part of the formula. If you ever want to write a formula, there's a nice little formula assistant as well. But a lot of you are probably concerned about standard costs, bill of materials, that kind of thing. And this is where assumptions really come in handy. So typically what we'll do is create some sort of sheet like the one I'm popping up here that'll have assumptions around prices per unit, material costs, labor cost, anything along those lines. And these assumptions are what are driving the bottom half of that product revenue sheet. So you don't have to go in and manually key these in every time you want to kind of make an adjustment to a material cost or something like that. You make the change here and that's going to flow through to your product revenue sheet. So pretty easy to track changes. And again, actuals and budget data. The one other thing I did want to show here was just, I did mention this is kind of like a pivot table. So if you ever wanted to get a different view of this sheet, you could always drag one of the dimensions from the top directly down to your rows. And I'm now going to have a customer level view of my units. Several of my clients do plan more at the customer level instead of the product level, just because they have maybe 20 or 30 customers who generate 80% of the revenue. And then the rest are just bucketed into another category. So that nice 80-20 rule y'all are probably familiar with. But the idea here is I have an entirely different way to look at my data and I can just start making adjustments. So rep A knows that customer 1 is going to buy maybe 10% more. They're going to upsell. I can make that change real quick, save off. And when I go back to my original view, that'll propagate through all of those calculations in the bottom half of the sheet. So there's a lot you can do with this type of sales forecasting. One model that we have recently built out for this as well is standard deviation. So a lot of times procurement or sourcing will be like, cool, that's what we think it's going to be, but what happens if we're a little bit off? So you can also generate an upper and lower bound kind of what you would expect your sales forecast to actually be. And then maybe for a more higher priority product, you go ahead and order the upper bound instead of just taking the median forecast. So just kind of walking through a couple basics there. From here, we'll quickly pivot into a couple of our financial statements and some reports in the time we have left. So what we're looking at right now is one of our summary financial statements. So this is going to be a P&L. Again, green numbers, black numbers. Your green numbers are integrated from your ERP typically. And then these line items will either come from one of those modeled sheets, so maybe a supporting schedule for something like workforce, something along those lines. One cool thing you can do here is adding comments. So Adaptive does allow for a pretty high degree of collaboration. You just right click and add a note, and those are all going to pull through to one of the reports I show you later. And then as I make changes for department 1 and save them, that automatically rolls up through the level structure as well. So just think you're not slowing down the system with business processes. You're not having to go through and open up every single one of these templates and save them individually and then kick everyone out of the system to have your data aggregate. You can have a bunch of people in here at once, and every time someone saves, that'll go ahead and update up your structure. Unless, of course, you've introduced an approval process. The one other thing I'll mention just on financial statements is we have introduced machine learning and artificial intelligence into the platform, which I know is pretty critical for manufacturing as well. So just to give you a kind of sense of what the initial stages of that look like, we do have a new feature called anomaly detection, which will actually look at the past 2 years of actuals for all of your data and highlight anywhere that's kind of an unexpected value. I have a demo instance here. That's why my instance lights up like a Christmas tree. But you should just be able to have a few cells highlighted that need your special attention, that kind of thing. The actual last thing here is that you'll still be able to always explore cell and drill back into inputs. So for something like salary and wages, if you want to get more detail on that and you have permission to do so, because we do have salary detail permission, then you'll be able to drill all the way back into the workforce planning model. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and cover our other two types of reporting in Adaptive, which are accessed right through here. So we're going to look at a couple of standard finance ones, and then I'm going to take us into 2 or 3 manufacturing specific ones. But this is what we call a web report. It's mainly going to be used for ad hoc reporting. So things that you need to spin up real quick for a budget versus actuals comparison or something like that. In terms of functionality, you'll see footnotes down here. And if you remember on the P&L, I mentioned those red carets. So all of those notes are now aggregating at the bottom of my report. I can review the notes that all of my department heads have left. And you can have these in line instead of in the footnotes, just personal preference. You can still always drill into numbers as well. So if you see a crazy variance for some reason like this, I might choose to drill all the way back into transactional detail. So you do not have to sign into your ERP or ask someone in accounting to explain why there's a variance in your actuals. You can add whatever columns you'd like here, vendor detail, invoice ID, anything like that. The one other feature here is just the ability to click into any of the accounts. You'll have access to every dimension you've loaded in the system. I have a lot in here. You can have as many as you want. I have a client who has like 200, completely up to you. But if I want to just pivot this report real quick by function, I'm now looking at salary and wages by my different groupings of my departments. So I'll just reset that. You can download these as Excel and PDF to distribute, but you do get up to 1,000 view-only users with your Workday subscription. So that should be plenty for you to allow department heads or your board to come in and just look at reports. And then much like everything in Adaptive, this type of report is drag and drop. So if you're trying to spin up a report real quick, you're not going to have to lean on MDX coding or anything like that. I just say, hey, I want to bring on my FTE account for some reason onto this report. Drag it on, and then you can actually run this report. So pretty easy to spin up this type of report. You'll see my FTE account that I just added. You can do a lot with these reports, though. This is a favorite of our C-level clients. So being able to stack your income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, and then have some of your financial metrics down at the bottom. This also highlights that you're not limited to just putting GL data on a report. You can also have calculated metrics, operational data, anything like that. And this is comparing 2 of my budget versions to actuals. In terms of manufacturing specific reports that we might look at, you can break things down by product statistics. So material cost, if you want to start getting into acquisition costs, inventory, anything like that. This is a type of report that you might choose to pull. And then I know I didn't get super into workforce planning, but just to give you a taste of how detailed we can get, I do have a report on my union versus non-union headcount and their salaries. So we can talk definitely about security around all of this, but the idea is whatever you want to build a report on, it's possible in Adaptive. So the last thing I'm going to cover today is Office Connect, before I kind of take questions if y'all have any. Office Connect is our plugin to Microsoft Office 365. So this is going to link your actuals and budget data from Adaptive directly into Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And it's going to be more useful for your formatted board presentations and that kind of thing. So a couple of things you're seeing now, I just highlighted linked cells. Blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive. So when I refresh this, it'll go ahead and update all those numbers. Green cells are dynamic time labels. So these will auto update every time I need a new period report. You'll notice a couple of the cells aren't highlighted at all, and that's because I still retain full Excel functionality in Office Connect. So you can have your trend lines, your charts, whatever you like to traditionally display. In terms of building these out, so if you already have a board report that you really like, something like that, then you can actually just install Office Connect, which comes with your subscription as well, and just drag accounts from Adaptive directly onto your existing report. So you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. I'll go ahead and just drag those over. Also, just a note, hopefully this elements pane over here looks pretty similar to what we saw in web reports. We'd like to try to keep all of our interfaces the same, just so there's not any confusion. Next step here is going to be to actually refresh the report. So right now I'm looking at a March board deck or board package. I want to roll this forward to April. So I'm going to come in and click on workbook properties, go ahead and roll the report date forward 1 month. I'll go ahead and refresh, and we're going to see all of these numbers at the bottom here populate, but you'll notice our labels also updated. So I have a new trailing 6 months with my working budget, any sort of last year comparisons, year to date, really whatever time comparisons you want to do. A couple other things on Office Connect, you can always expand line items to kind of do some ad hoc analysis if you want to. You are also able to explore directly back into Adaptive. So these aren't just static reports, you can still get back into Adaptive for the inputs. And then these are super easy to break down either by dimensions or departments. So if I wanted to generate this type of report for multiple, maybe factory locations, distribution warehouses, departments, whatever you want to break this down by, I came into repeating reports. I'm going to select those departments and create formatted P&Ls for each of them. So you see 3 new tabs here at the bottom for any data I have loaded into Adaptive for these departments. I now have departments 3, 2, 1, and still have my total company. And then you can start to branch out into things like product sales. So I have a few different attributes here, size, color, group, look at revenue by product. You get the idea, it's pretty dynamic. I do see one question, which is an absolute yes, but just for everyone else, can Adaptive be integrated to a fully capable MRP tool, like bringing in data or inventory purchases at a SKU level? Yes. So that would be pretty similar to the PO sheet that I showed at the beginning that did have orders with SKU level detail. We have integrated with a few different MRP systems. So I'm happy to talk about your specific system as well. But that is going to be all for me today. So I'll go ahead and pass it back to David.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. So hope everyone saw how powerful and flexible and really especially how easy Adaptive is to use with that simple drag and drop functionality as Haley was demonstrating. If you need more, we have plenty of resources that we can make available to you, such as a one-on-one demonstration that really speaks to your specific needs. We can also offer up ROI sessions to quantify the value of this investment, as well as a hands-on workshop where you can get your hands on the tool, a guided workshop, or as well as a trial. Just let us know what makes sense for you when we connect in our follow-up meeting, or reach out to us directly, and we're happy to help you. And we also just encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. And while you're there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process, technical tips on the tool, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. And thanks again for attending, everybody. As Haley mentioned earlier, one of our colleagues will be reaching out for a 15-minute follow-up call. Hopefully you'll take the time to share feedback and let us know how else we can help. Thanks again, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day.